ومن الناس من يقول آمنا بالله وباليوم الآخر وما هم بمؤمنين يخادعون الله والذين آمنوا وما يخدعون إلا أنفسهم وما يشعرون في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا ولهم عذاب أليم بما كانوا يكذبون وإذا قيل لهم لا تفسدوا في الأرض قالوا إنما نحن مصلحون ألا إنهم هم المفسدون ولكن لا يشعرون.
Okay, today what we're going to do is continue on with the second part of our series on the world of the Jinn, and today we're going to speak about how they live their lives. We're going to go into a little bit detail about how they live their lives. Okay? So everybody can see the screen. And let's start off here. We need to understand, once again, that the Jinn live on this earth where we do, and they are most likely to be found in certain places. So the Jinn, they don't live in the ocean, they don't live on the moon, they don't live in Mars. The Jinn, they live right here on the earth amongst us in certain places. And the places that they live in ruins. They live in unclean places like bathrooms, dung hills, garbage dumps, and graveyards. They also live in isolated places. Now remember, Allah told the Jinn to stay away from us because they can see us, but we cannot see them. So the good Jinn, they don't live near us. They live in isolated places like the desert, or they live out in the forest, in the woods. That's why you have to be careful when you're walking through the forest or you're walking through the desert that you don't throw rocks, because you can, or if you do throw a rock, you say Bismillah, because you could hit a Jinn, because you're in their territory. They live in the desert, they live in the forest, and they live in caves. They live in caves too. You know, and this is why, remember, we talked about the story of the prophet. Before the prophet received the revelation, he used to go to the cave to isolate himself. And remember, when Jibreel came to him, he thought Jibreel was a Jinn. The Jinn live in the caves. Okay? And after the prophet received revelation, he never ever went to a cave again. He would instead go to the mosque. So I want you guys to know, Muslims do not go to caves to be alone. We go to the mosque to do itikaf and be alone, because the cave are the homes of the Jinn. They also live in uninhabited or old abandoned houses. And I'm sure you guys hear many stories about how a person goes and buys a house, and you move into a new house, and all of a sudden dishes are falling. You hear footsteps at nighttime. Stuff may fly across the room. These are the Jinn that live there. They're trying to scare you away, because the Jinn like to scare us. So they're trying to scare you out of that house because they're living there. So this is why when we buy a new house or we move into a new apartment, we usually recite the Quran, or we recite the Falaq, the Nas, we recite Surah Al-Baqarah when we move into a new home. So in case jinns were living in there, they can get up and leave. That'll run them up out of there, because they will do everything to try to run you out if you're a person weak in your faith. Okay? So they live in places like that. Now, let me explain something else too. This does not mean that every bathroom has a jinn either. You probably don't have any jinns in your house. If you are a person who spends your time like most of you do here, most of you are plugged into this website. And you got the computer going on, listening to the Quran, listening to lectures. So most likely you don't have any jinn around you at all. You got angels. The jinns do not live in every bathroom. You may not have any jinns at all in your house. I don't think I have any at all in my house, and I'm sure many of you don't either. Okay? But if there were to be a jinn to be in your house, that most likely is where he would be in the bathroom. Okay, and this is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us to protect ourselves when going into the bathroom, or to protect ourselves when walking through the forest or whatnot. For example, whenever the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would enter the toilet, he used to say, "Oh Allah, I seek refuge with you from the evil ones, male and female." Okay? This is why we should say Bismillah before entering the bathroom, or A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim, either one, because they're all words of remembrance. Okay? Because if there are any jinn in the bathroom, this will protect you from any harm if they're there. So those are the places where the jinn live. And that's why you have to be careful going through their territory. When you're going through a dump pile, a dunghill, or a dump pile, say A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim, or Bismillah, okay, to protect you in case you're intruding on a jinn, jinns and their families who are living there. Also, the jinn, they love to sit outside between the shade and the sunlight. This is why the Prophet forbade us to sit with half your body in the sun and the other half of your body in the shade, because this is how the jinns sit. If it's a nice hot day, they love to sit outside with half their body in the shade and the other half in the sun. And we're supposed to be the opposite of them, so this is why we are forbidden from sitting that way. Okay? The jinn, they also have their own animals. They also have their own animals. Remember, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told the jinn that they can eat the bones and dung of any animal that was killed, in the name of Allah by them. So that hadith there is the proof that they have their own animals too, that they eat from. And there are some animals in particular that the jinn follow along behind. For example, the camel. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Verily, the camel has been created from devils, and behind every camel is a devil." So for this reason, the Prophet prohibited us from praying in the pastures of the camels. We can pray in the pasture of sheep. We can pray in the pasture of goats or cows, but we cannot make salat in the pasture of a camel, guys. Because this is where you find the jinn. The jinn, the camels are animals of the jinn as well. Okay? So this brings us to another question that many people ask. How do they look? How do the shaitan, the shayateen look? How do the jinn look? How does Iblis look? Well, the jinn, they have a very ugly appearance. They are different than the angels. Remember, the angels are beautiful. And as you guys know, we are too. We're beautiful too. Well, the jinn are different. They are ugly in appearance. And this is something accepted by the mind. In fact, Allah compares, He tells us how ugly they are. He tells us about the tree known as Zukum that grows in hell. It has the heads of devils. And Allah mentions this in the Quran when He tells us in the interpretation, the meaning. Is it better as a welcome or the tree of Zakum? Verily, we have appointed it as a torment for the wrongdoers. It is a tree that grows in the heart of hell. Its crop is as if it were the heads of devils. And also another proof that the shayateen, the jinn, are ugly is the hadith that we talked about, which proves that we cannot wear dreadlocks. A man came to the mosque. He had his hair uncombed. It was all over his head, going in different directions. And the Prophet became angry and told him, can't you go and comb your hair rather than come to the mosque looking like a jinn, looking like one of the jinn? The jinn let their hair grow all over their hair like dreadlocks without combing it. So they're very ugly in appearance. Also, they have two horns. They have two horns. And the Prophet ﷺ told us this about the shaitan. He said, do not seek to pray when the sun is rising or when it is setting, because it rises and sets between the two horns of a devil. Also the Prophet ﷺ said, if the sun is setting, then leave your prayer until it disappears. And do not wait for your prayer till the sun is rising. For verily it sets and rises between the horns of Shaitan. Now, you guys know before Islam, the pagan Arabs used to worship the sun. They used to bow down to the sun. So Iblis, the Shaitan, they would assemble themselves in that direction so the people could bow down to them. So that's what this hadith is talking about. When the Prophet said if the sun rises and sets between the horns of Shaitan, he's talking about the people who worship the sun. Shaitan will place himself in that position every day at those times of the day. Sunrise, sunset, and when it's in its zenith, he and his jinn, they stand in those directions. So all those people who pray to the sun and stuff will be praying to them. And this proves they also have two horns. Okay? So the jinn are ugly creatures. They have their hair all over their heads. They have two horns. They're ugly. And Allah has given them powers and abilities that He has not given to us as humans. And Allah has informed us of their ability as a means of warning us. By the way, Allah tells us about the jinn as a means of warning us. The same way He warns the jinn to stay away from us, Allah tells us to stay away from seeking them out too, because they are not your friends. They are your enemies and they can hurt you. One of the shaitanic jinn promised Solomon, Prophet Solomon, that he would be able to bring the throne of the Queen of Sheba to Jerusalem in a short time. And he did. So that's the proof as to how some of their powers are. And Allah mentions the story of Solomon in the Quran. Allah tells us in the interpretation, the meaning, a stalwart of the jinn said, I will bring it to you before you can rise from your place. I verily am strong and trusty for such work. One with whom was knowledgeable of the scriptures said, I will bring it to you before you can blink your eye. And when he saw it set in its presence, he said, this is from the blessings of my Lord. So this shows the power of the jinn. They're strong, they're fast, they're swift, they have abilities that we don't have. Again, another reason to stay away from them and not seek them out. Now, before the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received prophethood, the jinn used to be allowed to listen, to sit in and listen to the talk between Allah and the angels. Allah used to allow the jinn to sit below the lowest heaven. Remember, the heavens consist of 7 different levels. There are 7 different skies. And Allah used to allow the jinn to sit at the lowest level and eavesdrop. But then when Allah sent the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad, Allah no longer allowed the jinn to do this. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us what happened, that they were so upset. They were wondering what happened, why they couldn't listen in anymore. Because what happened is, after the Quran was revealed, Allah would knock the jinn away by sending a meteorite. So that's why when you look at the sky, guys, if you see a falling star or a meteorite, this is Allah knocking the jinn away from listening in to the conversations between He and His angels. Allah says in the interpretation of the meaning, and the jinn who had listened to the Quran said, we had sought the heaven, but had found it filled with strong waters and meteors, and we used to sit on places to listen. But now he who listens will find a flame of fire waiting for him. So now Allah does not allow the jinn to eavesdrop. And by the way, guys, this is how the magician or the fortune teller gets their knowledge too. Because the jinn will still sneak up and listen to the lowest heaven, to what the angels are saying. And then Allah will knock them away with a meteorite. And then they will go to the fortune teller or the magician and tell them what they've heard, and they will mix lies with it. So that's how those people who call themselves predicting the future, this is where they're getting their knowledge from, those jinns that are sitting there listening and eavesdropping. And they mix truth with lies. Okay? In addition to this, the jinn also have the ability to take on the shape of human beings or animals. Now remember, you can, just like you can never see an angel in his original form, you cannot see a jinn in their original form either, because they are part of the unseen world. But the jinn can take on the appearance of an ugly human. They usually do it as an old man. An old man. For example, even during the Battle of Badr, when the Muslims fought their first battle against the unbelievers, Shaitan took on the appearance of an old man named Suraka. And he went to the unbelievers and promised them victory, talking about how successful they're going to be. But then when the battle began, and Iblis, he saw the angels. He saw Jibreel riding on a white horse coming at him to kill him. Iblis ran away and left the people alone on the battlefield. Because this is how he is. He'll take the form of an ugly man and come to you, or an ugly woman and come to you and tell you what you want to hear, and then he'll run away. This is how he does. And this is how the jinn do. By the way, the jinn can also take the form of a dead relative. They can take the form of a dead relative. For example, say you got pictures. That's why we don't have pictures on our house. Say you got pictures of your grandmother hanging up, and your grandmother is deceased. You go to sleep at night and you have a dream. And in that dream, it's your grandmother telling you she's come back from the dead, and she's warning you about things that's going to happen. Remember, Allah says He does not bring the dead back to this world. So this is not your grandmother. This is a jinn. A jinn who has seen her picture and taken on her form. And he's now coming to you in your dreams, in your sleeps, making you think that he's her to get you to commit shirk, to get you to think that Allah is revealing things to you when He's not. Okay? So they can take the form of pictures and things like that too. They can scare you. They do that to scare people. They'll take the form of a dead relative or a friend of yours or something like that to scare you. Okay? Also, the jinn take the form of snakes too. And this is why in Islam it is forbidden for us to kill a snake that you find in your house. Now, this is talking about the snakes that live in the desert. We're not talking about a house snake or a garden snake. We're talking about these evil snakes like cobras and stuff like that that live in the desert. It's forbidden to kill them if you find them in your house. Instead, if you find a snake in your house, you should warn it and order it to leave, and then you leave for 3 days. If you come back and that snake is still there, then you kill it. But the reason why you warn it is in case it is a snake and it's a Muslim. In case it's a good snake, a good jinn who is a Muslim and he got trapped in your house, or he was taking refuge in your house. If he's a good Muslim, this will make him leave. He will know that you live here. He's in the wrong place. This will give him time to leave. But if he doesn't leave, then he's an evil jinn, and he will arm you, and then you kill him. But you give it 3 days. And again, this is not for the garden snakes. You can kill those things. These are for the snakes like cobras and snakes that live out in the desert. Because sometimes a good jinn will happen to come past and get into your territory accidentally. Okay? Also, the jinn are also able to possess people. They also have the power to not only harm humans by killing them, but they can possess you. They can possess you. And this is what the prophet meant when he said, verily, Shaitan flows in man like the flowing of the blood through his veins. That hadith is the proof that the jinn can possess you. And they can make you do things that you shouldn't do. But this is not for people to become afraid. This is not for people to become afraid. Because despite all the powers that the jinn have, they are really weak creatures. And they can only harm the human beings who are weak in their faith. Those of you who are living in sin, those of you who are giving in to your desires, those are the humans that they can harm. They cannot harm a person that is strong in their faith. And the proof of this is found in the following verses, where Allah tells us in the interpretation, the meaning, verily, the plot of Shaitan is weak. So despite all the physical powers they have and abilities they have, they are weaker than we are emotionally. They are weaker than we are mentally. And they can only harm those humans who are weak in faith. Allah did not give the jinn the ability to compel us or force us to do anything. You know how the Christians, they like to say, the devil made me do it. Well, I want you guys to understand, Shaitan cannot make you do anything against your will. I repeat, Shaitan cannot make you do anything against your will. He doesn't have this power. Okay? Allah tells us in the interpretation, the meaning, and Shaitan indeed found his calculation true concerning them, for they follow him, all except a group of true believers. He had no warrant whatsoever against them. So here we can see, if you are a true believer, if you believe in Allah, and you're living your life to obey His commands, you're praying your prayers, you're wearing hijab, you're wearing beard, you're doing all the things Allah ordered you to do, and you're staying away from sin, Shaitan has no power over you at all. I hope everyone understands that. In fact, more proof of this is the fact that on the day of judgment, Shaitan will say, "My Lord, because you have sent me astray, I verily shall adorn the path of error for them in the earth, and I shall mislead every one of them except those of yours who are devoted." So here again is more proof that the Shaitan has no power over any of us who truly believe in Allah and who live it. You don't just say you're a Muslim, but you act it. That's why you women need to cover up and wear hijab. Hijab is a command from Allah. You cannot be openly committing sin and call yourself a believer and think that you are free from Shaitan. Shaitan will hunt you down, and he will make you one of his. Okay? And again, Allah tells us in the interpretation, the meaning, "As for my slaves, you have no power over any of them except for those weak enough to follow you." And on the day of judgment, when we all stand before Allah, after being judged, all the people who led the people astray, the leaders will lead their people to the hellfire. Iblis will stand there, and all who followed him, he will lead them to the hellfire. And Iblis will say, "Oh Allah," he will say to the people, "Allah promised you a promise of truth, and I promised you and I failed you, and I had no power over you. All I did was just whisper to you. You chose to obey me. I cannot help you, nor can you help me." On the day of judgment, the people will be blaming Shaitan, and he will tell them, "You can't blame me. I didn't have any power over you. You had the ability to listen or reject me. You chose to listen to me, so don't blame me." Subhanallah. Subhanallah. So thus, guys, we can see, even though the jinn share all these powers and all these abilities, they really have no effect over anyone who is a true believer. They can only harm those Muslims who are weak in faith. They can only harm those Muslims who give in to their desires. Those women sitting around committing fornication on the internet with all these boyfriends and love affairs, they can harm them. Those men doing the same thing, they can harm them. The people who don't pray, who don't fast, slanderers, backbiters, gossipers, these are the people who fall victim to Shaitan. We have an example from the companions, Umar. Umar was so strong in his faith that Shaitan used to run away from him. The Prophet ﷺ once said, "Oh Umar, Shaitan runs away from you." He said, "Umar, I see the jinns and mankind both running from you." But this is not just Umar. Anyone with strong faith can overcome Shaitan. Anyone with strong faith can defeat him and belittle him. Your jinn will always whisper to you, to disobey Allah. But every time you choose to reject him, he becomes weaker and weaker and weaker against you. And eventually he will have no effect on you. You will live your life in obedience.